Welcome to Sleepy Love Tales, soothing romance for a restful night. If these stories help you unwind, be sure to subscribe. For now, close your eyes and let's begin tonight's story, What We Renounced. The conference hall in Geneva smelled of filtered air and ambition. Outside, Lake Leman lay grey and impassive beneath October clouds, while inside 200 delegates debated the calculus of survival. How many calories per person per day? Which border crossings could remain open? Whether dignity could be quantified in metric tons of grain? Dr. Mira Khoury had attended 17 such summits in the past decade. She knew the rhythm, the opening addresses thick with statistics, the breakout sessions where real decisions were made in euphemism, the late-night emails sent to camps where mothers queued for water with infants on their hips. She had learned not to expect transformation, only incremental mitigation. Hope was a luxury she had surgically excised somewhere between her second and third deployment. She was reviewing case files in the atrium when she heard his voice. Not the words. Those were diplomatic, measured, directed at a cluster of EU observers, but the timbre, the particular weight he gave to certain syllables, the pause before difficult truths. She knew that voice the way one knows the sound of rain on a childhood roof, not by conscious memory, but by the body's involuntary response. Mira did not turn immediately. She finished reading the paragraph about malnutrition rates in the eastern camps, closed the folder with deliberate care, and only then allowed herself to look. 13 years had carved new lines beside his eyes. His hair, once uniformly dark, now showed silver at the temples. He wore a suit that fit too well, the armour of someone who had learned to move in rooms where power was a language spoken in nods and strategic silences. But his hands, those were unchanged. Long fingers, a small scar on his left thumb from the time he'd helped her move medical supplies in the rain and dropped a crate on his own hand. Daniel Roth. The man who had chosen history over her and been right to do so, and broken her anyway. He saw her perhaps 2 seconds after she saw him. The recognition moved across his face like wind over water, a moment of absolute stillness followed by something she couldn't name. Not quite pleasure, not quite pain. The complicated relief of seeing someone who knows exactly how much you've survived. "Dr. Khoury," he said, crossing the atrium with that same measured stride. "I didn't know you'd be attending." "Mr. Roth." She extended her hand. His grip was firm, professional, and lasted precisely 1 second longer than protocol required. "I wasn't certain you still involved yourself in field operations." A flicker of something, irony, regret, crossed his features. "I find I can't quite abandon old habits." He stood in the atrium's calculated light, surrounded by the hum of translated conversations and the soft click of laptop keys. 13 years compressed into the space between their bodies. 13 years since the border city, since the makeshift hospital, since the night he'd told her he was leaving for the capital, for politics, for the chance to change policy rather than simply witness its failures. She'd understood, even then, had even agreed, in the theoretical way one agrees that amputations sometimes save lives. Understanding didn't prevent the wound. "You look well," Daniel said, and she heard what he didn't say. "You look like you survived." "So do you," Mira replied, meaning, "You look like success tastes exactly as bitter as you feared." The summit's architecture forced proximity. Mira served on the medical advisory panel. Daniel chaired the Intergovernmental Working Group on Food Security. Their meetings overlapped, their briefings converged, their recommendations required coordination. By the third day, they had fallen into an old rhythm, her clinical assessments complementing his strategic frameworks, her refusal to soften data balancing his need to find politically viable solutions. On the 4th evening, they found themselves sharing a car to a dinner with regional representatives. Rain streaked the windows, Geneva's streets glowed with wet light. "Do you remember," Daniel said quietly, "the night it rained in the camp? When the medical tent flooded and we moved everything to the administrative building?" Mira watched the city slide past. "I remember you carried 12 boxes of antibiotics on a sprained ankle and refused to admit you were injured. You noticed. I was a medical student. Noticing was my job. You were more than that." His reflection in the window met hers. "You saw things the rest of us had learned not to see." She didn't answer immediately. The silence between them had texture, weight. Finally, "I saw that you would leave. I was right about that." "Yes." No deflection, no defence. "You were." The dinner was interminable. Courses arriving with diplomatic precision, conversations circling the same territorial disputes, the same funding shortfalls, the same careful avoidance of the word failure. Mira sat 3 seats from Daniel and felt the distance like a physical ache. Twice their eyes met across the table. Once his hand moved toward his water glass at the same moment hers did, and they both stopped. The near collision somehow more intimate than touch. Later, much later, she found herself alone in the hotel lounge, too restless for sleep. She was reading incident reports when Daniel appeared, still in his dinner clothes, tie loosened. "May I?" He gestured to the chair across from hers. She nodded. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city's lights reflected on the lake, doubling themselves. "I kept your letter," Daniel said finally. "The one you wrote after I left." Mira's hand stilled on her tablet. "I never sent a letter." "I know. I found it in the medical tent after you'd been reassigned. It was in your handwriting, addressed to me unsealed. You must have set it down and forgotten it, or decided against sending it." He paused. "I've never..." "Read it." She felt something crack in her chest. 13 years, and you never... "I was afraid," he said simply. "Afraid it would confirm what I already knew. That I'd chosen wrong. That I'd sacrificed something irreplaceable for something merely important. And now? Now I know I was right to be afraid." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Mira, I've brokered treaties, prevented famines, moved millions of dollars of aid. I've done exactly what I set out to do. And not a day has passed when I didn't wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed." She should have been angry. Should have reminded him that wondering changed nothing, that good intentions were just another form of poverty, that she had built an entire life on the foundation of his absence. Instead, she heard herself say, "The letter wasn't what you think." What was it? It wasn't an accusation. It was... She searched for the right word. It was a release. I was giving you permission to leave, without guilt. Telling you that I understood, that I would be fine, that your work mattered more than my feelings. She met his eyes. "I was lying, of course, but it was a kind lie." "You were always kind," Daniel said softly, "even when kindness was the most expensive thing you owned." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said, hadn't allowed themselves to say. The air between them felt charged, magnetic. Mira was acutely aware of the distance between their chairs, less than 2 feet, more than an ocean. She was aware of his breathing, of the way his fingers had tightened on each other, of the small muscle working in his jaw. "I should go," she said, not moving. "Yes," Daniel agreed, staying precisely where he was. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, taut and trembling. Then Daniel stood, slowly, and extended his hand to help her up. It was a gesture from another era, courtly and careful. She took his hand. He drew her to her feet. They stood closer than they'd stood since the day he left. Close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes. Not quite brown, not quite gold. That particular amber that had once seemed to her the colour of honesty. "Good night, Mira," he said, releasing her hand. Good night, Daniel. She left first, feeling his gaze follow her to the elevator. In her room, she stood at the window for a long time, watching the lake, trying to remember why renunciation had once seemed noble rather than simply wasteful. The crisis came on the 7th day of the summit, during a closed session on resource allocation. Daniel presented the working group's final recommendations. On paper, they were brilliant. A graduated system that would stabilise food distribution across 17 camps, leveraging existing infrastructure while creating sustainable supply chains. It would save thousands of lives. It would also require closing 3 humanitarian corridors and consolidating resources in centralised distribution points. The vulnerable populations in the smaller, more remote camps would have to relocate or accept reduced provisions for a transitional period of 4 to 6 months. Mira listened to the presentation in mounting disbelief. When Daniel finished, she raised her hand. Dr. Khoury, the moderator acknowledged. I have a question about the transitional period. Her voice was calm, clinical. Has the working group considered the medical implications of relocating populations that include acute malnutrition cases, untreated tuberculosis, and pregnant women in their 3rd trimester? Daniel's expression didn't change. We've factored in medical considerations. The relocation will be phased and supported. Supported how? With what staff? The camps you're proposing to close house the medical personnel who've been treating those populations for years. The centralised points are already operating at capacity. The efficiencies gained from consolidation would free up resources in 4 to 6 months, Mira cut in. What happens in month 2, month 3, when women miscarry because they're travelling in the back of trucks? When children die of entirely preventable infections because the clinic that knew their medical history no longer exists? The room had gone very quiet. Daniel's jaw tightened. Dr. Khoury, I understand your concerns, but the alternative is systematic collapse. If we don't consolidate now, there won't be any clinics in 6 months. Not in the remote camps, not anywhere. That's a hypothesis, Mira said. What I'm describing is a certainty. It's a calculated risk. It's a death sentence phrased in the passive voice. They stared at each other across the conference table. 13 years collapsed into nothing. They were back in the border city, back in the argument they'd had the night before he left. His conviction that systemic change required impossible choices. Her insistence that impossible choices had names and faces and medical histories. The moderator intervened, calling for a recess. Delegates filed out, murmuring. Mira gathered her materials with shaking hands. She was halfway to the door when Daniel caught up with her in the corridor. Mira, please, don't. She turned on him. Don't ask me to understand. I've spent 13 years understanding why you left, why you chose policy over people, why you convinced yourself that distance equals objectivity. I understood it all, Daniel. I forgave it all. But I will not watch you do it again. This isn't the same, he said, and she could hear the desperation beneath his control. Then I had a choice. Now I'm out of choices. The funding isn't there. The political will isn't there. If I don't propose this compromise, someone else will propose something worse. So you've absolved yourself before you've even acted. Mira's voice was cold now, surgically precise. How convenient. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, a sound without joy. Daniel, you've built an entire career on being the reasonable one, the pragmatic one. The one who makes the hard choices so others don't have to. But there's a word for what you're doing, and it isn't pragmatism. It's cowardice. She saw the words land, saw him flinch. Good. She wanted him to flinch. She wanted him to feel something other than the terrible calm of the morally certain. You don't understand, he said quietly. You've never had to make these decisions. No, Mira agreed. I've only had to live with their consequences. I've held the children you decided weren't worth saving. I've told the mothers that yes, help is coming. Just hold on a little longer, knowing it was a lie. I've done the work you were too important to do. I know. His voice cracked just slightly. Mira, I know. Do you think I don't know? They stood in the corridor, close enough to touch, separated by everything that mattered. I'm withdrawing from the summit, Mira said. I won't lend my credibility to this. If you leave, it changes nothing. The policy will still pass. I know, she said, but I'll be able to live with myself. She walked away then, and didn't look back. In her hotel room, she packed methodically, checking flight options, composing her resignation email to the medical advisory board. Her hands were steady. She'd survived Daniel Roth once before. She could survive him again. What surprised her was how much it still hurt. How, after all these years, all this careful distance, the wound was exactly where she'd left it. 3 weeks later, Mira was in her apartment in Berlin when her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Dr. Khoury, it's Daniel Roth. She closed her eyes. How did you get this number? I asked someone who cared less about professional ethics than I should have. A pause. I'm in Berlin. The summit concluded yesterday. The policy passed, if you were wondering. I wasn't. A lie. She checked the summit. Proceedings daily, hating herself for it. Could I see you? Just to talk. I'm flying out tomorrow morning. She should have said no. Should have told him that they'd said everything there was to say, that talk was just another form of postponement. Instead, where are you? The Adlon. But I can come to you if... No. Her apartment was too small, too personal. I'll come to you. Give me an hour. She dressed carefully, as if for surgery. Clean lines, dark colours, nothing that could be misinterpreted. On the U-Bahn, she practiced the things she would say. Calm things. Final things. The conversation that would let them both move on. The hotel lobby was all marble and muted gold. Daniel was waiting in one of the leather armchairs, still in his conference clothes, but somehow diminished, as if the past weeks had taken something from him. He stood when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure either. They took the elevator in silence. His room was on the 7th floor, a suite with a view of the Brandenburg Gate. It was the kind of room where history was made in careful increments. Mira stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting. "The policy you opposed," Daniel said from behind her. "It was modified. Not enough, probably not nearly enough by your standards, but the transitional period was extended to 9 months. Additional mobile medical units were allocated, and there's a provision for emergency exceptions. Because I left? Because you were right." He moved closer, but not close enough to touch. "And because enough other people were brave enough to say so. You started something when you walked out, Mira. You made it possible for others to object." "That's a political answer," she said. "I asked you for the truth. The truth is that I spent 3 weeks defending a policy I didn't believe in, because I was too afraid to admit I was wrong. The truth is that I've spent 13 years making pragmatic compromises and calling it wisdom. The truth is," his voice faltered, "the truth is that I left you once because I thought I could do more good without you than with you, and I've regretted it every single day since." Mira turned to face him. "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Don't rewrite history because you're lonely. Don't turn this into a romance because you've had a crisis of conscience." Her voice was fierce, protective of something she couldn't name. "You made the right choice, Daniel. You've saved lives. You've changed policy. Everything you've done has mattered. And what if it wasn't enough?" He stepped closer. "What if I saved thousands and lost the one thing that made me human?" "Stop." She held up a hand. "Just stop. I've survived you once. I've built a life. A good life. I don't need you to validate it or complicate it or..." "I love you," he said. The words fell into the space between them like stones into deep water. Mira stood very still. "I've always loved you," Daniel continued, quieter now. "I loved you when I left. I loved you when I didn't read your letter. I loved you in every meeting, every negotiation, every time I made a choice that required me to forget what it felt like to be fully human. And I know that saying it now after all this time is unfair and selfish and probably too late. But I'm tired, Mira. I'm tired of choosing the world over the person I love." "You can't," she whispered. "You can't do this. You can't just... I know I have no right. But I need you to know that it wasn't lack of love that made me leave. It was having too much love and no faith that I deserved to keep it." Mira felt something breaking in her chest, something she'd sealed over years ago with scar tissue and deliberate amnesia. "And what do you want from me now?" "Forgiveness. Permission. I want..." He stopped, struggling for words. "I want one moment where I don't choose duty over desire, where I don't calculate costs and benefits, where I just..." He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "Where I just choose you." His thumb traced a small circle on her palm. Such a tiny gesture. 13 years of longing compressed into that small, repetitive motion. "Daniel," she said, and his name in her mouth felt like coming home and burning alive all at once. "This won't fix anything. I know. It won't change the policy or the past or the fact that you'll leave again because that's who you are. I know. And I can't promise you anything. I can't promise I won't regret this tomorrow, or hate you for making me feel this again, or..." He kissed her. Not frantically, not desperately. Slowly, carefully, with the reverence of someone touching something they'd believed forever lost. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. She tasted salt and didn't know if it was from his tears or hers. When they broke apart, she was shaking. "I never stopped," she said against his mouth. "I never stopped loving you, and I hated myself for it. And I still..." "I know," he breathed. "I know." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt 13 years of careful distance collapse into hunger. Her fingers found his tie, loosened it with trembling hands. He made a sound low in his throat when she pulled it free, when her hands moved to his collar. Each button she opened felt like a confession. They moved to the bed, not with passion, but with something older, more fundamental. Permission. Witness. The acknowledgement that some hungers survive on denial but die from starvation. Daniel's hands found the zipper at the back of her dress. He drew it down so slowly she thought she might shatter from anticipation. The fabric whispered as it fell away. His fingers traced the line of her spine, each vertebra a point of contact that made her breath catch. When he reached the small of her back, he pressed his palm there, spanning the width of her, and she felt claimed in a way that had nothing to do with possession and everything to do with recognition. "You're shaking," he said softly. "So are you." He was. She could feel it in his hands as he touched her, could see it in the tight control of his breathing. She reached for him, fingers working the buttons of his shirt with more urgency now. She needed to see him, needed to map the ways time had changed him, needed proof that this was real. When his shirt fell away, she saw that he'd lost weight, the ribs too prominent, the collarbones sharp, evidence of the ways he'd been consuming himself. She pressed her lips to his sternum, tasted salt and the faint bitterness of hotel soap. He shuddered, hands tightening on her waist. Mira. Her name was a question and an answer all at once. She traced kisses along the ridge of his collarbone, felt his breath stop entirely. His hands moved to her waist, thumbs pressing into the curve there with delicious pressure. She remembered this, the way he always held her as if she might dissolve, as if touch required absolute attention. Slowly, she said, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to him or to herself. He nodded, but his hands were already moving with aching deliberation. When he lowered his head to kiss the hollow of her neck, she arched into him, a sound escaping her that was half plea, half surrender. They finished undressing with the focused intensity of ritual. Each garment removed revealed new territory to be explored, remembered, worshipped. His gaze moved over her with such raw need that she felt it like a physical touch. He reached for her, then stopped, hands hovering. "Can I?" "Yes," she breathed. "Please, yes." His touch was reverent, exploratory, relearning the landscape of her body. She gasped, head falling back, and he took advantage, mouth finding the curve of her neck, teeth grazing skin that had forgotten this particular electricity. They had undressed with trembling urgency, the last barriers falling away with a gracelessness that made it all the more intimate. She loved him for it, for the crack in his careful control, for being human enough to be desperate. When they were finally skin to skin, the contact was almost overwhelming. She pressed against him, and the heat between them was staggering. The evidence of his desire sent warmth flooding through her entire body. His response to her touch was immediate, visceral, a groan that was the most honest sound she'd ever heard. "Mira, if you... I won't... I know," she said softly. "Bed," he managed. "Now." They fell onto the mattress in a tangle of limbs, all pretense of patience abandoned. He covered her body with his, and she welcomed the weight, the delicious pressure of him against her, his presence, his warmth, the solid reality of him. It was everything she'd been starving for. "I want to know you again," he said against her ear, voice rough, "every part of you." "Yes," she said, though she wasn't sure she could survive the intensity of it. He kissed a slow path down her body, lingering at her neck, her collarbone, moving to her ribs, her navel, the sensitive skin of her hip bones. Every touch was deliberate, worshipful, as if he were memorizing her all over again. When his touch found her center, she cried out, hands fisting in the sheets. He was methodical, thorough, learning her responses with the same focused attention he brought to everything. When he found the rhythm that made her hips lift helplessly, he stayed there, building sensation with devastating patience. She felt it gathering, that bright tension spiraling tighter. Her hands found his hair, and he made a satisfied sound that vibrated through her entire body. The pleasure built and built until she shattered, back arching, a sound torn from her throat that was his name and a prayer and pure sensation. He gentled her through it, kissing her hip, her ribs, working his way back up her trembling body. When he reached her mouth, she felt desire spike, again, impossibly. "I need you," she whispered, "all of you." The moment of preparation was tender, fumbling, beautifully human. The vulnerability of it, the awkward necessities, somehow made it more intimate. When he settled between her thighs again, she wrapped her legs around him. He moved slowly, carefully, giving them both time to adjust, to remember this particular joining. They both went still, breathing together, overwhelmed. 13 years, he said, voice breaking. 13 years I've wanted this. "I know," she whispered. "I know." He began to move, and it was everything and not enough. The heat of skin on skin, the building rhythm, the way their bodies remembered how to move together even after all this time. She met him completely, holding him close, leaving marks she hoped would last for days. The pleasure built differently this time, slower, deeper, a tide rather than a wave. She felt it in every nerve, every cell, a recognition that went beyond physical, sensation. This was what she'd been missing. Not just desire, but this, being known completely, being chosen, being held as if she mattered more than anything. "Look at me," Daniel said, and she opened her eyes, met his gaze. The intimacy of it, seeing him seeing her in this moment of absolute vulnerability, nearly undid her. "Don't stop," she pleaded. "Please don't stop." "Never," he promised, and shifted, finding an angle that made stars explode behind her eyes. "Is that—" "Yes, yes, perfect." He moved with renewed purpose, and she felt herself climbing again, higher this time, everything in her body straining toward release. When it came, she cried out, a sound he caught with his mouth, kissing her through the waves of sensation that seemed endless. She felt him follow moments later, the tension in every muscle, the way he buried his face in her neck and groaned her name like a man saved or damned. She couldn't tell which. His body shuddered, and she held him through it, hands gentle on his back, whispering words that had no meaning beyond comfort. Afterwards they lay tangled in sheets that smelled of hotel lavender, and them not speaking. His hand rested on her hip, thumb making those same small circles, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow from gallop to canter to something approaching normal. She felt marked by him, not just physically, but something deeper, as if the past 13 years had been provisional, and this was the signature that made them real. "I don't know what happens now," Daniel said finally. "Nothing," Mira replied. "Everything. I don't know either. I can't promise I'll be better at this, at choosing. I know." She lifted her head to look at him. "And I can't promise I'll forgive you the next time you choose duty over us. But maybe," she hesitated, "maybe love doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe it can just be what it is." "Which is?" "This," she said simply. "Right now. True." He pulled her closer, buried his face in her hair. "I'll take it," he whispered. "However much you can give, I'll take it." They fell asleep as the city lights came on outside, two bodies finally at rest after years of running from the same wound. Mira woke alone. For one terrible moment she thought he'd left, that the night had been a dream or a mistake or both. Then she heard water running in the bathroom, heard him humming something tuneless. The relief was disproportionate, embarrassing. She found her clothes, dressed quickly. When Daniel emerged, hair damp, shirt half buttoned, he stopped at the sight of her. "You're leaving," he said. "I have a clinic in 3 hours." "Right, of course." He didn't move to stop her. "Mira, last night was last night," she said gently. "We don't have to define it. I want to see you again. You will. The world is small and we're both stubborn." She crossed to him, rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "But Daniel, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell me you'll change your life for this. Just," she touched his face, "just let it be what it is." "And what is it?" "Real," she said. "That's enough." She left before he could argue, before either of them could complicate the simplicity they'd found. In the taxi, she watched Berlin slide past and felt something loosening in her chest. Not happiness exactly, but possibility, the acknowledgement that renunciation wasn't the only form of honour. 6 months passed. They didn't speak every day. Sometimes weeks went by with only brief emails, updates on projects, articles shared, the small gestures of continued presence. Mira treated her patients, published papers, mentored new doctors. Daniel brokered agreements, testified before committees, slowly and carefully built coalitions for the modified policy she'd opposed. And sometimes, not often, but enough, they found themselves in the same city, Geneva, Berlin, once Brussels, where they spent a single night in a hotel near the European Parliament, talking until dawn about everything except whether what they had could be called a future. It was Daniel who proposed the clinic. "There's funding available," he said during one of their rare phone calls, "for a medical centre in one of the consolidated camps. It could be your design, your staffing model. I could help navigate the bureaucracy, but it would be yours." "Why?" Mira asked, suspicious of grand gestures. "Because you were right," he said simply, "about the cost of consolidation, about the need for local expertise, about..." He paused. "About most things, actually." She laughed, surprised. "Most things?" "You were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You said I would leave again because that's who I am." His voice was quiet, serious. "But I'm trying to learn that leaving and choosing aren't the same thing. That maybe I can do the work and love you too. That maybe..." He took a breath. "Maybe renunciation isn't the only path to doing good." Mira sat with that for a long moment. Outside her apartment window, Berlin was settling into evening. "The clinic," she said finally. "Tell me more about the funding." They designed it together over the next 3 months. Video calls at odd hours, shared documents filled with their competing annotations, occasional arguments about staffing ratios that somehow always ended in laughter. When the clinic opened, a modest building with clean lines and solar panels, named simply the Community Medical Centre, with both their names listed as advisors on a small plaque by the door. Mira stood in the doorway and felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope that wasn't naive, but earned. Daniel couldn't attend the opening. He was testifying in The Hague about humanitarian corridor protections, but he sent a message that Mira read alone in her new office. "Thank you for letting me choose this. Choose you. Choose both." She folded the message into her wallet next to a photograph of the clinic, next to a 13-year-old letter she'd finally asked him to return, still unsealed. That evening she called him. He answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted. "How did the testimony go?" she asked. "Brutal, necessary, the usual." She heard him shifting, could picture him loosening his tie. "How was the opening?" "Perfect. You would have hated the speeches." He laughed. "Probably. Mira..." "I know," she said softly. "I know." "Do you?" "Because I'm not sure I've said it clearly enough. What you've built, what we've built, it matters more than anything I've done alone. You make me better, not just at the work, but at being..." He struggled for the word. "Human," she supplied. "Yes, that." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything. When they finally said goodbye, Mira stood at her window watching the camp settle into evening, lights coming on in tents, children's voices raised in some game, the ordinary evidence of life persisting. She thought about Daniel in his hotel, room in The Hague, about the distance between them and the closeness that distance could no longer diminish. She thought about renunciation and how it had seemed, once, like the highest form of love. How wrong that had been, how much they'd lost believing it, but also how much they'd found in finally letting go. Love, she understood now, wasn't about choosing the world or the person. It was about allowing both to exist, to inform each other, to make demands that sometimes conflicted and sometimes aligned. It was about being brave enough to want something beyond duty, and wise enough to know that wanting didn't diminish the duty. It made it matter more. Her phone chimed. A message from Daniel. "When you're next in Geneva, I have something for you." "What is it?" she wrote back. "Time," he replied. "Just time." Mira smiled. Outside, the stars were beginning to emerge. Inside, she felt something unfurling in her chest. Not the wild hope of youth, but something steadier. The knowledge that what they'd renounced hadn't died, had only been waiting, and that what bloomed from waiting might be more resilient than anything that came easy. She wrote back, "I'll be there in 3 weeks." His response was immediate. "I'll be waiting." And for the first time in 13 years, Mira believed that waiting might finally lead to arrival. Not to a perfect ending, but to something better. A beginning that knew its own cost and chose itself anyway. Outside, the camp settled into the particular peace of evening. Inside, Mira closed her laptop and allowed herself just for a moment to imagine 3 weeks from now. Daniel's hand in hers, time that belonged to them alone, the possibility of tomorrow. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If this is enough. The clock in Dr. Rahman's office ticks with the aggressive precision of something expensive. She watches the second hand complete another rotation, while her husband shifts beside her on the cream-coloured sofa, his hand resting on his knee, close enough to reach for hers but separate. "Let's try something different today," Dr. Rahman says, her pen poised above her yellow legal pad. "I'd like each of you to write a letter to the other, not to share aloud, just to write. Sometimes we discover what we mean by seeing it on the page. The assignment feels both absurd and dangerous. They've been married for 7 years. What could possibly need to be written that hasn't already been said in the careful architecture of their shared life?" But she takes the paper Dr. Rahman offers, and so does he. "Dear Michael, do you remember the library? Not ours, the one where we met. November, I think, or maybe early December. You were in the economics section, and I was supposed to be researching 18th century literature, but I'd gotten distracted by the way the afternoon light came through those tall windows. You looked up and our eyes met, and for just a moment I thought, but I didn't think anything. That's the truth. Or if I did, I thought, this is someone I could know. This is someone safe." She stops writing, looks up. Michael's pen moves steadily across his page, his brow furrowed in that familiar expression of concentration. She spent 7 years watching that face, learning its vocabulary of small tensions and releases. The scholarship that brought her to that campus had felt like a lifeline, a way out of a childhood spent making do, making less seem like enough. She'd learned early that gratitude was its own form of currency, that if you were careful and quiet and didn't ask for too much, people would let you stay. Michael had been careful too, she realises now, methodical in his affection, building their relationship like one of his economic models, variables controlled, outcomes predicted, risk minimised. 5 more minutes, Dr. Rahman says gently. "You proposed in that same library, do you remember? In the archives room where no one ever went. You said you'd been carrying the ring for 2 months, waiting for the perfect moment, but then you realised that we didn't need perfect, we needed real. I said yes immediately. I didn't hesitate. Why didn't I hesitate?" She sets down her pen. That last line wasn't supposed to appear. She folds the paper quickly before Michael can see, before Dr. Rahman can ask her to share. "Time," Dr. Rahman says. "You can keep those, or share them later, if you choose. But I want you both to notice. How did it feel to write to each other rather than speak?" Michael clears his throat. "Easier," he says, "and harder." She nods, still clutching her folded paper. That night, in their carefully curated bedroom, grey walls, white bedding, a single framed photograph from their honeymoon. In Montreal, she lies awake listening to Michael's breathing slow and deepen. The letter's in her purse downstairs in the kitchen where she left it. She should destroy it. Instead, she gets up quietly, goes downstairs in the dark and writes another. "Dear Michael, what if careful isn't enough? What if all this time we've been so busy building something stable that we forgot to ask if it was what we actually wanted? I'm afraid that if I say this out loud, you'll think I'm ungrateful, or worse, that I'm someone who doesn't know how to be satisfied. My mother used to say that about women who left their marriages. She didn't know when she had it good. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. What if having it good isn't the same as having it right? What if I'm hungry for something I can't even name? She folds this letter too, puts it in the back of the drawer where she keeps old receipts and expired coupons and other small evidences of a life being lived within careful margins. Upstairs, Michael is still sleeping. She stands in the doorway and watches him. This good man, this kind man, this man who has never once raised his voice or forgotten an anniversary, or failed to notice when she's had a hard day. This man she married because he felt like safety. This man she's beginning to realise she's never fully desired. The thought stops her breath. She goes back downstairs, pulls out the letter, adds one more line. What if I told you that sometimes I dream about running? Not from you. Never from you. Just running. Into something I can't see yet. Something that might be waiting. If only I were brave enough to look. She puts the letter away and goes back to bed. Michael turns toward her in his sleep, his arm draping across her waist with the unconscious familiarity of 7 years of shared nights. She lies very still and thinks about the library, about that first moment, about how she told herself that what she felt wasn't disappointment but something more, mature, relief. Relief that she'd found someone who wouldn't ask her to be anything other than what she already was. Someone who would never require her to run. The clock on the nightstand ticks through the dark hours. Outside, November rain begins to fall on their tidy neighbourhood with its tidy lawns and its tidy lives. And she lies there, awake and still, wondering if the problem with careful is that it never has to be brave. Dr. Raman assigns homework. Spend 30 minutes each day in conversation without solving anything. Just talk, she says. See what emerges when you're not trying to fix it. They choose evening walks. Their neighbourhood is designed for them. Young professionals with modest but growing ambitions. Trees planted at mathematically pleasing intervals. Sidewalks smooth enough for running strollers though they don't have children yet. Haven't decided if they want them. Or rather, haven't decided if they want the version of themselves that would have them. Tell me something I don't know, Michael says on the third walk. His hands are in his pockets. They're not holding hands these days, though neither has acknowledged the shift. She thinks for a long time. The air smells like chimney smoke and fallen leaves. Someone is cooking dinner. Garlic, butter, something rich. I'm not sure I know how to be happy, she says finally. He stops walking. What? I know how to be grateful. I know how to be satisfied. I know how to make a list of everything that's good and tell myself that's enough. But actual happiness, the kind where you're not checking to make sure it's still there, I don't know if I've ever felt that. Not sustained. Not without underneath it this feeling that it could all be taken away. Michael stands very still. A leaf falls between them. Because of your childhood, he says carefully, not a question. Maybe. Probably. Does it matter why? It matters because... He stops, starts again. Because I've spent 7 years trying to give you security. I thought that was what you needed. I thought if I could just be stable enough, present enough, if I could prove that I wasn't going anywhere, you thought you could fix me. I thought I could love you into feeling safe. She looks at him then, really looks, and sees something she's never allowed herself to see before. He's terrified too. Terrified that love might not be enough. Terrified that all his careful constancy might be insufficient. Michael, she says softly, what if neither of us can be fixed? They walk in silence after that. 3 more blocks, then home to the house they bought together, the mortgage they split exactly down the middle, the life they've architected with such meticulous fairness. In the kitchen, making tea, he says, "Do you remember the night before our wedding?" She nods. They'd stayed apart that night, observing tradition. She'd been at her mother's house, in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and thinking about thresholds. "I almost called you," he says, "around midnight. I wanted to, I don't know, make sure you were sure." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid you'd say you weren't." The kettle whistles. Neither moves to turn it off. "And now?" she asks. "Now I'm afraid you'll say you weren't. Past tense. That you made a mistake and you've been too kind to tell me." She turns off the burner, pours water over tea bags, watching the colour bloom and spread. "I don't think I made a mistake," she says slowly. "I think I made the safest choice I knew how to make. And I think maybe we both did." He takes his mug, wraps both hands around it though the ceramic is too hot. Is safe such a terrible thing to be? His voice is barely audible. No, but it might be a terrible thing to settle for. That night they lie in bed without touching. Not angry, not distant, just separate. She can feel the inches between them like a physical presence, a gap that contains all the words they don't know how to say. "Can I tell you something?" Michael says into the dark. "Yes. When we met, I was in love with someone else, a woman from my ethics seminar. She was... God, she was brilliant. Terrifying. She said whatever she thought and didn't apologise, and she wanted things loudly, demanded them. She was going to change the world, and she knew it." He pauses. She doesn't speak. "And I was drawn to her like gravity, but I was also exhausted by her. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. Every silence felt like an accusation. When she finally ended it, told me I was too careful, too timid, that I'd never actually take a risk, I was devastated and relieved. And then you met me," she says quietly. "And then I met you, and you didn't require anything I couldn't give. You didn't push, you didn't demand, you just accepted. Me, us, this." He turns toward her, though they still don't touch. "I thought that was love," he says, "the absence of fear, the presence of peace. What do you think it is now?" "I don't know anymore, but I think maybe love is supposed to ask something of you, supposed to require you to grow. And I think I chose you because you let me stay exactly who I was." The confession hangs in the air between them, not cruel, but devastating in its honesty. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispers. "Because Dr. Rahman said to tell you something you don't know. And because if we're going to do this, actually do this, figure out if this marriage can be something more than safe, then I need you to know that I'm as afraid as you are." She reaches out then, not to comfort, but to confirm. Her hand finds his in the dark, palm to palm. His skin is warm, familiar. They lie like that for a long time, holding hands like teenagers, like people who don't yet know how to ask for more than this small connection. "I've been writing letters," she says finally. "Letters I don't send. To you." "What do they say?" "Things I'm afraid to say out. Loud." "Will you show me?" "I don't know. Maybe. Eventually." His thumb moves across her knuckles, a small gesture that contains multitudes. "I want to read them," he says, "even if they hurt, especially if they hurt." She thinks about the drawer downstairs, about the folded papers accumulating like small acts of sedition. Letters that say, "What if this isn't enough? What if I need something I can't name? What if the life we've built is a beautiful prison and neither of us has the courage to ask for the key?" "Okay," she says, "but not yet. I'm not ready yet." "When you are." They fall asleep still holding hands, but in the morning she wakes alone. Michael is already up, already dressed, already performing the morning routine that shapes their days. Coffee made, newspaper skimmed, emails checked. When she comes downstairs, he kisses her forehead, a habit so ingrained neither of them remembers when it started, and asks if she slept well. "Fine," she says, though she dreamed all night, of running. On their next walk, he asks her about desire. Not just, "I don't mean sex," though that too, but what do you desire? If you could have anything, be anything, do anything. The question is so enormous she almost laughs. "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know how to want things, not real things. Not things that might require me to be selfish or difficult or demanding. Try, he says. Just try. What if there were no consequences? What if you couldn't fail? What if I wasn't here to disappoint? They've stopped walking. They're standing under a streetlight that's flickering, some malfunction in its timing, so it keeps going dark and then bright again, dark and then bright. I want, she says slowly, testing each word, to feel necessary, not needed in the way that's about function, not about being useful or good or appropriate. I want to feel like my presence in the world makes some kind of essential difference, like I'm not just, she struggles for the word, interchangeable. The light flickers. In the darkness she can barely see his face. You've never felt that? He asks. With me? I felt cherished, protected, valued. She takes a breath, but not necessary. Not like if I disappeared, there would be a hole in the shape of me. More like I've been a good solution to the problem of your loneliness. It's the most honest thing she's ever said to him, and she braces for his anger, his hurt, his defense. Instead, he says, yes, I think that's fair. The light comes back on. They look at each other. I don't know how to love someone in the way you're describing, he says. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of intensity, obsession, whatever you want to call it. I love through steadiness, through showing up, through being present and predictable, and I don't know if that will ever feel like enough to you. I don't know either, she admits. They walk home in silence, but something has shifted. Not resolution, but recognition. That night she writes another letter. Dear Michael, you asked what I desire. Here's the truth. I desire to be devoured. Not destroyed. Devoured. I want someone to need me the way fire needs air. I want to be looked at like I'm the answer to a question someone's been asking their whole life. I want to matter urgently, not just steadily. And I don't know if that's something you can give me. I don't know if it's something anyone can give anyone. Maybe it's something I have to give myself. But here's what I do know. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being grateful for a love that doesn't challenge me. I don't want to be comfortable. I want to be claimed. And I don't know if that makes me ungrateful or honest. But I'm tired of not knowing the difference. She folds the letter, adds it to the drawer. Upstairs, Michael is already asleep. She stands in the doorway watching him. This good man. This careful man. And feels a tenderness so acute it's almost grief, because she loves him, and she's beginning to understand that love might not be enough. The letter is discovered on a Wednesday. She doesn't remember leaving it out. Must have been careless, distracted, must have forgotten to put it back in the drawer with the others. Michael finds it in the morning while looking for a warranty receipt. Something mundane, something that doesn't matter now and will never matter again. She's upstairs when she hears the silence change quality, the particular stillness of someone absorbing a blow. When she comes down, he's sitting at the kitchen table, the letter unfolded between his hands. He's not reading it anymore, just staring at it, like it might rearrange itself into something less damaging. Michael, she says, but her voice has no power. He looks up. His face is very pale. How many are there? She doesn't pretend to misunderstand. 8, maybe 9. All like this? Some, not all. Some are kinda. He makes a sound that might be a laugh, but isn't. Kinda. Jesus. He puts his head in his hands. I'm not sure which would be worse, if you'd been planning to show them to me or if you never were. She sits down across from him. The morning light is coming through the kitchen window, illuminating the breakfast dishes neither of them has cleared, the coffee growing cold in their mugs. Evidence of an ordinary morning about to calcify into the morning everything changed. I wasn't planning anything, she says. I was just trying to figure out what I felt, what I wanted. And what you wanted was to be devoured. He picks up the letter, quotes from it without looking. I want someone to need me the way fire needs air. That's what you wrote. 3 weeks ago, according to the date. Yes. Did you mean it? She wants to lie, wants to soften it, explain it away, tell him it was just words, just a confused moment, just the aftermath of too much therapy. Instead, she says, yes, I meant it. He leaves for work without saying goodbye. She hears the door close, the car start, the sound of him driving away. She sits at the kitchen table for a long time, the letter still lying there, the handwriting looking strange and accusatory in the morning light. She reads it again, tries to find the lie in it, the exaggeration, the unfair thing that would let her take it back. But it's all true. Every word. She wants to be necessary. She wants to matter urgently. She wants to be more than a good solution to someone's loneliness. And she doesn't know if Michael can give her that. Worse, she doesn't know if she has the right to ask. He doesn't come home that night. Sends a text around 6, staying at David's. Need time to think. She walks through their house, their carefully assembled life, and sees it differently now. The furniture they chose together at IKEA, assembling it on Saturday afternoons with patient domesticity. The paint colours they debated, settling always on the safest choice, the one that wouldn't offend or challenge. The bookshelves organised by subject, then alphabetically, because Michael likes order and she likes the look of order even if she doesn't care about it intrinsically. Everything in this house is a compromise. Everything is reasonable. Nothing demands anything. She makes dinner for one, doesn't eat it. Pours a glass of wine, then a second. Sits on their sensible grey couch and stares at the wall. Around 9, her phone rings. It's Michael. I read the others, he says without preamble. Her stomach drops. How did you... The drawer under the warranties. I found them all. I've been at David's reading them. She closes her eyes. Do you know what the worst part is? His voice is very steady, very controlled. Not that you're unhappy. I knew you were unhappy. Maybe not how much, but I knew. The worst part is that in 8 letters, you never once say that you love me. Michael, you say you respect me. You say you're grateful. You say I'm a good man, a kind man, a safe man. But you never say you love me. Did you notice that? She hadn't. But now that he's said it, she can't unsay it. I do love you, she whispers. Do you? Or do you just appreciate me? Because those aren't the same thing, and I think we've been pretending they are for 7 years, she can't answer. I need to ask you something, he says, and I need you to be honest. Is there someone else? No. God, no. There's never been anyone else. I don't mean physically. I mean in your head. In these letters. Are you writing to me, or are you writing to someone you wish I was? The question lands like a blade. I don't know, she says. The line is quiet for a long time. I'll be at David's for a while, he says finally. A week. Maybe more. You can stay in the house. It's half yours anyway. But I need... His voice cracks. I need time to figure out if I'm mourning something I never actually had. Michael, I loved you, he says. Past tense. I'm not sure I can say it in the present. Anymore. Not until I know if the person I loved actually exists. He hangs up before she can respond. She doesn't sleep. She lies in their bed. Her bed now, temporarily, maybe permanently, and stares at the ceiling and thinks about all the ways she's been cruel without meaning to be. Because he's right. She never said she loved him. Not in the letters. Not in the raw, unguarded place where she was trying to be honest. She said she wanted to be devoured. She said she was hungry. She said she felt like she was living in a beautiful prison. But she never said, I love you. And that's what makes this so hard. Around 3 a.m, she gets up and writes another letter. But this one she doesn't fold and hide. This one she leaves on his pillow, where he'll find it if he comes home. When he comes home. If. Dear Michael, you're right. I never said I loved you. I don't know why. Maybe because I was so busy trying to explain what was wrong that I forgot to name what was right. But here it is. I love you. I have always loved you. Even when I was writing those other letters, even when I was imagining running, even when I was cruel enough to call what we have a compromise. I love your steadiness. I love the way you fold laundry with the same careful attention you give to everything. I love that you've never once made me feel stupid or small. I love that you remember things. My mother's birthday, the name of my childhood dog, how I like my coffee. I love that you chose me, that you keep choosing me, even though I'm making it so hard. But here's the thing, I don't know if love is enough, and I'm terrified that saying that out loud makes me sound like a romantic child who thinks passion is more important than commitment. I don't think that. I know that what we have is rare and precious, and so many people never find even this much peace. But I'm also terrified that if I settle for peace, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I gave up to get it. You asked if there's someone else. There isn't. But maybe there's a version of myself I never became, and I can feel her watching me, asking why I chose safety over courage. I don't know how to reconcile these things. I don't know how to be both grateful and hungry, how to love you and still feel like I'm dying of thirst. All I know is that I'm sorry, for the hurt, for the confusion, for not being clear enough or brave enough to say this before I wrote it in letters I never meant for you to see. I love you, and I don't know if that's enough for either of us anymore. She leaves the letter and goes downstairs, makes coffee in the pre-dawn dark, watches the streetlights blink off as morning comes. Her phone buzzes. A text from Michael. I'm coming home tomorrow, not to decide anything, just to talk, okay? She types back, okay. Then she goes outside and sits on the front steps in her pyjamas and waits for the sun to rise on whatever comes next. Michael comes home on a Friday evening. She's made dinner. Nothing elaborate, just pasta and salad. The kind of meal they've shared 1,000 times. But her hands shake as she sets the table, and she has to try 3 times to open the wine. He looks tired when he walks in. Thinner maybe, or just worn. He puts his bag down by the door and stands there, neither of them sure of the protocol for this moment. Hi, she says. Hi. They sit at the kitchen table, the food between them like a neutral territory. For a while they just eat, or pretend to. She pushes pasta around her plate. He takes small, methodical bites, the way he does everything. Finally he sets down his fork. I read your last letter, he says. The one you left on the pillow. She nods. You said you don't know if love is enough, and I've been thinking about that all week. What does enough even mean? Enough for what? To stay married? To be happy? To justify the investment of 7 years? I don't know. I don't either, but I think... He starts again. I think maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not whether love is enough. Maybe it's whether we're willing to let it be enough, even when it's not perfect, even when we're hungry for things we can't name. She feels something crack open in her chest. Michael, wait, let me finish. He reaches across the table, takes her hand. His palm is warm, solid. I've spent this week being angry, hurt, feeling betrayed, even though I know that's not entirely fair. But underneath all that, there's this other feeling I keep trying to ignore. What feeling? Relief. She stares at him. Relief that it's finally on the table, that we're not pretending anymore, that we can stop being so fucking careful with each other and just... He makes a helpless gesture. Be honest, even if honesty hurts, especially if it hurts. Are you saying you want to stay married? Her voice is barely audible. I'm saying I want to know who we are when we're not being careful, when we're not trying, to be the people we think we should be. I want to know what happens if we actually risk something. Risk what? He squeezes her hand. Risk this. Risk us. Risk the possibility that if we tell the whole truth, we might not survive it. They don't make love that night, but they talk. They talk until midnight, then until 2, then until the sky starts to lighten. They talk about the thesis advisor she had a crush on in grad school, the one who made her feel visible in a way Michael never has. About the woman from his ethics seminar, the one he mentioned before, and how he still sometimes wonders what his life would have looked like if he'd been brave enough to keep her. They talk about desire, not the safe, comfortable desire of 7 years together, but the dangerous kind. The kind that asks you to change, to risk, to surrender. "Do you know what I'm afraid of?" she asks as the sun comes up. They're on the couch now, sitting at opposite ends, facing each other. "Tell me." "I'm afraid that if I admit how much I want, I'll be unlovable, that I'll be too much, that you'll look at me and see someone greedy and demanding and you'll realise you made a mistake." "And do you know what I'm afraid of?" He leans forward. "I'm afraid that I'm not capable of the kind of love you need, that I'll try and still fall short and you'll leave anyway, and I'll have proven that I was never enough to begin with." They look at each other across the coffee table, across 7 years, across the careful architecture they've built and are now dismantling brick by brick. "What if," she says slowly, "we stopped trying to be enough? What if we just tried to be honest?" "How?" "I don't know. But maybe we start by admitting what we actually want, not what we think we should want, not what's reasonable or fair or safe, just what we want." Michael nods slowly. "Okay, you first." She takes a breath. "I want you to need me. Not in the calm, grateful way you need a good partner. I want you to need me desperately. I want to matter to you in a way that scares you. I want..." She's crying now, can't help it. "I want to feel essential." He moves across the couch, pulls her into his arms. She can feel his heart beating against her cheek. "Okay," he says. "Okay, my turn." She waits. "I want to let go," he says quietly. "I want to stop being so controlled. I want to... God, I want to be able to want you without worrying about whether I'm doing it right, whether I'm enough. I want to be selfish. I want to take. And I've never let myself do that because I was so afraid that if I did, you'd see how desperate I actually am." She pulls back, looks at him. "Desperate. For you. For this. For the feeling that I'm not just maintaining a system, keeping a marriage running smoothly. I want..." His voice breaks. "I want to lose control with you, and I don't know how." Something shifts in the air between them. A door opening, a possibility emerging. "Show me," she whispers. He kisses her. It's not like their usual kisses, not the polite, affectionate kisses they exchange in greeting and parting. This is raw, urgent. His hands in her hair, pulling her closer, almost rough in his need. Her hands grip his shoulders, nails pressing through the fabric of his shirt, holding on like she might fall. They break apart, breathless. His eyes are dark, pupils wide, and she can see 7 years of restraint beginning to crack. "Upstairs," she says, her voice hoarse. "No." His hand finds the small of her back, pulls her flush against him. "Here, now. I'm done waiting." The words send heat flooding through her. She's never heard this tone in his voice, command mixed with desperation, control slipping into pure need. He kisses her again, deeper this time, his mouth claiming hers with an intensity that makes her knees weaken. His tongue traces her lower lip before delving deeper, tasting her, and she responds with equal hunger, her hands moving to the buttons of his shirt. "Wait," he breathes against her mouth. He takes both her wrists in one hand, gentle but firm, holding them still. "I said I wanted to take. Let me." The words, the touch, the way he's looking at her, like she's water and he's been crossing a desert. It's everything she wrote about in those hidden letters, everything she was afraid to ask for. "Yes," she whispers. "Yes." He releases her wrists only to frame her face with both hands, kissing her with a thoroughness that makes her dizzy. His thumbs trace her cheekbones, tender even in his urgency, and when he finally pulls back, they're both breathing hard. "I need to see you," he says. "All of you. Not just your body. I want to see everything you've been hiding." She understands what he means. She stands, and with trembling fingers begins to unbutton her blouse. Not seductively. She's never been good at that kind of performance. But honestly, each button revealing more skin, more vulnerability until the fabric slides from her shoulders. Michael's breath catches audibly. In 7 years he's seen her countless times, but never like this. Never with her standing before him in the grey morning light, chin lifted, eyes meeting his, offering herself not out of duty or routine, but out of genuine desire. "I'm hungry," she says, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm so hungry, Michael, for something I don't even know how to name, and I'm afraid that hunger makes me ungrateful, makes me broken." "You're not broken." He stands, crosses to her, and the way he moves, purposeful, predatory, makes her pulse quicken. He traces the line of her collarbone with his fingertips, feather-light, and she shivers. "You're just alive, and so beautiful it hurts to look at you." His hands slide down her arms, across her ribs, learning her body as if for the first time. When his palms find her, his touch gentle but possessive, she gasps. "Are you?" she manages to ask. "Are you alive with me?" Instead of answering, he lowers his head, his mouth finding the curve of her neck, the hollow of her throat. Each kiss is a brand, a claim, and she arches into him, her hands tangling in his hair. "Michael," she gasps, "please." "Please what?" He looks up at her, and there's something in his eyes she's never seen before. Power, possession, pure satisfaction at her need. "Tell me what you want." "You. I want you. Not the careful version. I want..." She struggles for the words, her mind hazy with desire. "I want you to be ruthless with me. I want you to take. I want to feel necessary." Something breaks in his expression, the last restraint shattering. "You are necessary," he says, his voice rough. "You're so necessary I can't breathe without you." She stands before him, vulnerable in ways that have nothing to do with clothing, everything to do with honesty. The asymmetry should frighten her. It does frighten her, but it's exactly what she needs, to be exposed while he remains in control, to surrender without safety. His hands bracket her hips, thumbs tracing gentle circles. "Is that enough?" he asks. "Is that what you need?" "Yes," she gasps. "Yes, but don't stop. Don't be gentle. I don't want gentle." "Good." He pulls her against him. "Because I don't think I can be gentle right now." He kisses her again, one hand tangling in her hair, tilting her head back to give him access to her throat. He kisses down the column of her neck, and when his teeth graze the sensitive skin where neck meets shoulder, she cries out. "Too much," he murmurs against her skin. "Not enough," she breathes. "More." He lifts her. She weighs nothing to him in this moment, and carries her the 3 steps to the couch. Lays her down on the cushions. The morning light through the windows paints her skin gold, illuminates every curve. "God," he says, 7 years. 7 years, and I never let myself just look at you like this." "Look at me now," she says. "See me now." He does. His gaze travels the length of her body, and she fights the instinct to cover herself, to hide. Instead, she opens to him, arms, heart, everything. An invitation, a claim. His hand traces a path from her ankle to her inner thigh, his touch light but deliberate. "Tell me," he says. "Tell me what you need." "Touch me," she whispers. "Touch me like you own me." "I do own you." His fingers move higher. "Just like you own me." We've always belonged to each other. I've just been too afraid to act like it. His touch is revelation. He explores with patience that's almost cruel, learning every response, every gasp, every shiver. She's beyond words now, lost in sensation, in the building heat, in the way he's claiming her with hands and mouth and breath. You're so responsive, he murmurs, watching her face. So beautiful like this. I want to memorize every sound you make. When his mouth follows where his hands have been, she cries out his name. The sensation is overwhelming, heat and pressure and pleasure building like a storm. She's never felt so exposed, so claimed, so thoroughly possessed. Michael, she gasps, I can't. Yes, you can. He doesn't stop. Let go. I want to feel you come apart for me. And she does. The climax crashes through her like a wave, powerful and consuming, making her back arch and her hands fist in his hair. He works her through it, gentling as she becomes sensitive, pressing soft kisses as she trembles and gasps. When she finally opens her eyes, he's watching her with an expression of such naked desire that it steals her breath all over again. Come here, she says, reaching for him. He stands and she watches as he removes his own barriers. She's always known he was beautiful, but she's never allowed herself to really look, to really appreciate the lines of his body, the strength in his frame. When he returns to her, skin to skin, the contact is electric. They fit together perfectly. They always have. But this time there's no hesitation, no careful choreography. Just need and heat and 7 years of restraint finally breaking. Look at me, he says as they join. I want to see your eyes. She meets his gaze and the connection, physical, emotional, spiritual, is almost more than she can bear. For a moment, neither of them moves. They just breathe together, complete. Then he begins to move, and thought becomes impossible. It's not gentle. She asked for ruthless, and he gives it to her, each movement deep and purposeful, making her gasp. His hands grip her hips, holding her, grounding her even as he sends her flying. Is this what you wanted? He asks, his voice rough. Is this how you needed it? Yes, she cries out. Yes, don't stop. Never. He leans down, captures her mouth in a fierce kiss. I'm never stopping. You're mine. Say it. I'm yours, she gasps against his lips. I'm yours. The rhythm builds, urgent and relentless. She wraps her legs around him, takes him deeper, meets him movement for movement. The couch creaks beneath them. The morning light strengthens. Somewhere outside their neighbourhood is waking, but here in this room there's nothing ordinary, nothing careful, nothing held back. I'm close, she gasps. Michael, wait for me. His rhythm becomes erratic, control fraying. Surrender with me. She holds back barely, her whole body tensing. Then he shifts angle and she shatters, crying out as waves of pleasure crash through her. She feels the moment he follows, the way he shudders, the way he groans her name, the way he collapses against her, trembling. They lie tangled together, hearts racing, skin damp with exertion. She can feel the occasional aftershock ripple through both of them. That was, he starts. I know. I know. He lifts his head, looks at her, and his eyes are bright with emotion. I love you. God, I love you so much. I love you too. She touches his face, traces the line of his jaw. I didn't know it could be like that. Between us. I didn't know we could. Neither did I. He kisses her softly. But I want it to be like that. Always. No more holding back. No more being careful. Promise. I promise. I'm going to need you like this every day. I'm going to make you feel essential every time I touch you. She pulls him down for another kiss, deeper this time, already feeling desire stirring again despite her exhaustion. Upstairs, she murmurs against his mouth. Take me to bed. We have years of careful to make up for. He lifts her, she wraps around him, and carries her toward the stairs. They leave evidence scattered in the living room, passion finally unleashed, restraint finally abandoned. At the top of the stairs, he presses her against the wall, kisses her breathless, and she can feel his desire building again. "I can't get enough of you," he says. "Good," she replies. "Don't." They make it to the bedroom. They have all day. They have the rest of their lives. And for the first time in 7 years, she doesn't feel like she's dying of thirst. She feels claimed, desired, essential. She feels enough. They burn the letters on a Saturday morning in early December, almost exactly 7 years after they met. They do it in the fireplace, standing together, taking turns feeding the pages to the flames. 8 letters, 9 letters. She's lost count. Each one a confession, an accusation, a map of the territory between who they were and who they're becoming. "Do you want to read them first?" she asks. "There are a few you haven't seen." He considers, then shakes his head. "No, I know what they say, or enough of what they say. I think maybe they've done their work." So they burn them. The paper catches quickly, curling at the edges, the ink disappearing into ash. She watches her own handwriting consumed and feels lighter, feels like she's releasing something she's been carrying for too long. When the last letter is burning, Michael puts his arm around her waist, pulls her against him. "Are you sad?" he asks. "A little, but mostly relieved." "Me too." They watch the flames until there's nothing left but embers, and then they go to the kitchen and make breakfast together. Eggs, toast, coffee, the ordinary rituals of a Saturday morning, but different now, easier. "I have something for you," she says after they've eaten, after the dishes are washed and put away. She hands him an envelope, her name on it, his name below it, a stamp already affixed. "What is this?" "A letter. The last one, I think. Or the first new one. I'm not sure which." "Should I read it now?" "If you want." He opens it carefully, unfolds the single page. She watches his face as he reads, sees the moment when his eyes brighten, when his mouth softens. When he's done, he looks at her. "I choose you," he reads aloud. "Not because you're safe, not because you're stable, not because you're the best option or the most practical choice. I choose you because you're willing to be scared with me, because you're willing to admit you don't have the answers, because you kiss me like you're claiming me and touch me like I matter urgently, and need me in a way that gives me permission to need you back." He folds the letter, puts it in his pocket. "Is that true?" he asks. "Every word. And if it gets hard again, when we forget, when we fall back into being careful, then we remind each other. We write more letters. We tell the truth. We ask for what we want." He nods slowly. "And you'll stay? I'm not going anywhere, are you?" "No." He pulls her close, kisses the top of her head. "I'm right where I want to be." They decide to take a trip. Not a grand vacation. Neither of them has time for that. But a weekend away. Somewhere they've never been. Somewhere new. They choose a cabin in the mountains, 3 hours north, where December snow is already falling. They arrive at dusk, the sky purple and pink, the trees heavy with white. "It's beautiful," she says, standing on the porch while Michael brings in their bags. "Come inside," he calls. "It's freezing out there." But she stays a moment longer, breathing cold air, feeling alive in her skin in a way she hasn't in years. Then she goes inside, where Michael has already started a fire, where wine is being opened, where a weekend of honesty and hunger and choosing each other is just beginning. That night, after they've made love, not carefully, not quietly, but with the urgent need that's become their new language, she lies in his arms and asks, "Do you think we would have made it? If I hadn't written those letters, if you hadn't found them?" I don't know, he says honestly. Maybe. Or maybe we would have just continued. Been fine. Been comfortable. Would that have been enough? For me? Maybe. I'm good at accepting things. At making do. He pauses. But not for you. And eventually your hunger would have eaten through everything. I'd rather have this. Risk and truth and actually feeling things than slow suffocation disguised as peace. She turns to look at him. When did you get so wise? When I got so scared I had no choice. They fall asleep like that, skin to skin, honest and whole. The weekend passes in a blur of snow and firelight, long conversations and longer silences, the kind where you can just be present without having to perform being together. On Sunday morning, he wakes early and finds her standing at the window, watching the snowfall. What are you thinking? He asks, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. That I'm happy, she says, and that it scares me, because I keep waiting for something to ruin it. Keep waiting to wake up and find out it was temporary. It might be, he says, not the love. I don't think that's temporary, but the ease, the feeling that we've figured it out, that might not last. So what do? We don't wait for it to get hard again. We don't brace for impact. We just stay here, in this moment, in this happiness. And when it gets hard, because it will, we remember that we did this once. We found our way back. We can do it again. She leans back against him, feels his warmth, his solidity, his presence. I choose you, she says. I want you to know that. I choose you. I know, he says. I can feel it. They drive home through snow that's still falling. The road's slick and slow. Neither of them minds. They're not in a hurry. When they pull into their driveway, their house looks different. Or maybe they're different, and the house just looks like itself. A place they've chosen, a life they're building, a commitment they're honouring not out of obligation but out of desire. Inside, there's a letter waiting for her on the kitchen table. From him. When did you write this? She asks, holding the envelope. Last night, after you fell asleep. She opens it. Dear love, I'm watching you sleep, and I'm thinking about thresholds. The one we crossed 7 years ago when we got married. The one we crossed when I found your letters. The one we're crossing now into whatever comes next. You asked me once if love is enough. I told you I didn't know, but I think I do now. Love isn't enough if you're asking it to be a shield. If you're asking it to protect you from hunger, from fear, from the terror of wanting something you might not get. But love is enough if you're asking it to be a foundation, if you're asking it to be the place you return to after you've been brave, after you've risked, after you've admitted what you actually want. I want you, not the version of you who's grateful and patient and accommodating. I want the version who's hungry, who admits she's thirsty, who demands to be devoured. And I want to be the man who does the devouring, not carefully, not apologetically, but completely. So here's my promise. I will need you. I will claim you. I will remind you every day that you're essential. And if we forget, when we forget, we'll write more letters. We'll tell the truth. We'll choose each other again. Because that's what love is, I think. Not a feeling that arrives and stays, but a choice we make over and over. A threshold we cross again and again. I choose you. I will always choose you. She reads it twice, then sets it down and goes to find him. He's in the living room, standing by the window looking out at their snow-covered street. Thank you, she says. He turns. For what? For being willing to be scared with me, he smiles. Thank you for making it worth it. She goes to him, and he wraps his arms around her, and they stand there as evening falls, as their life together continues, as the future they're building moment by moment unfolds, and she thinks, yes, this is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. The end.